On this great episode of the Dave's Gone By show devoted to Broadway and the Tony nominations, we have an actual Tony nominee. He's Brian Usifer, and just look at the credits on his website here. Music director, pianist, orchestrator and arranger, and musical producer. So this man knows his way around not just keyboards, but around the sound of a Broadway show and the way that the music can bring up the feelings of from a song to an entire show. He has a master's degree in collaborative piano from my alma mater, NYU. And collaborative piano means they actually study not just to be concert pianists, but to work with other musicians and with singers. He has served as the musical director and orchestrator for The Heart of Rock and Roll, A Beautiful Noise, that's the Neil Diamond musical, Frozen and Kinky Boots on Broadway. He is Tony nominated this season for the revival of Chess. So Brian, your move, congratulations on your nomination. How you feel? Stupid question, but how you feel?
I feel great. It's really, it's really overwhelming, but it's a life-changing feeling. It's really incredible. I'm very excited.
So has there, since the nomination, because you get a lot of work and you're working steadily and so forth, do you feel that it has changed your career, getting the nomination?
I don't know. It's only been a couple weeks. I mean, I think, it's been really nice to hear from people and to have people reach out and just to say, congrats, and I'm excited for what's next. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, again, so working on Chess, one of the things that interests me is that you got the nomination, and yet
Yeah.
if you go to the Internet Broadway database, it also lists the original orchestrator.
Yeah.
There's Elgers or Eliers, I don't know how to spell it.
Elias.
Elias, oh,
Yeah.
Elias.
Yeah.
So was he involved in this revival at all, or are you just working from some level of his old, or do you just have to credit him because he was the first and he gets credit for that?
Yeah. I mean, Anders is he was the first person that worked on this music with Benny back on the concert album and has been with it the entire time. So Anders is as much a part of the DNA of this music as, as Benny and Bjorn and Tim are. And so we're both credited for the Broadway show because his work is just part of the fabric of it. And a lot of the things that are in there, are come straight from his sort of original work. And then there are lots of things that I had to sort of do from scratch. There are things that I took from his and sort of enhanced. And so, we share credit on the show. The Tony eligibility ended up only being for me, and I don't know why. They did not sort of give a reason, but
Well,
that's,
can I ask
yeah.
an example of something that you felt you had to do from scratch
Yeah.
for this revival of chess?
Yeah, that's a great question. The things that I've done from scratch for this are there's a brand new overture. The show always started. There was like a little prologue in the version of the show that gets licensed that goes into the story of chess, and of course on the original Black album it just starts with Murano. So for this production for Broadway, Michael Mayer, the director, and I both felt like it should start big and with like a really dramatic statement that would set up the audience for what's about to happen. And it's funny, we went through, I think I came with like 7 different versions of this overture, and some of them were wildly different, some of them were very similar, and Michael and I had a really fun time kind of going back and forth, like, oh, what if it was this, and what if it was this? And ultimately, what we decided is that we wanted to start it with Endgame, which is like the big dramatic sort of, end part of the show. And then segue into our 3 main characters' main themes. So it goes from Endgame into Nobody's Side, into Anthem, into Pity the Child, and then back into Endgame, and then that's how the show starts. And the curtain comes up and you see the orchestra, and the audience sits there and gets to listen and watch the orchestra play this overture, which also tells them the music and the orchestra are part of this storytelling and part of this show. So it does a lot of work by it's long. I actually was like, can it really be 3 minutes? And Mike was like, yes, absolutely. But people really they clap for the band, they clap at the end. I mean, it's a really nice like moment in the show to give the music of the show some love by itself before we start singing.
And I am kind of curious, I mean, you being the orchestrator of note on this production, but it's also like everything in theater, decisions by committee. Are there? I mean, you're working with the ABBA guys as
Yep.
well as Eliers. So, I mean, how much do you feel like I'm in? I kind of call the shots, or is everything like has to be voted on or something?
Yeah, it's definitely not that. Everybody in a collaboration, the weight of people's voices change from minute to minute and from moment to, from idea to idea. There might be something that I feel like I'm the sort of main driver, and I'm going to say this is what I want, and kind of get everybody on board with that. And then there are times when the director says this is what I want, or I have to be supportive of the singers or the composer. I mean, being an orchestrator and a music supervisor at the same time, I am kind of the person that gets to be part of all of those decisions, which is really fun. But that's the word I'll use.
All right.
But yeah, it's definitely a collaboration, and it really just depends on what it is. But Benny and I were in contact the entire time. I mean, he's amazing, and Tim has been around. So we've developed the show for almost 10 years. So we have a relationship, from all of this time spent together working on it.
Now, I mentioned before we went on camera that not everybody who watches this show is terribly cognizant of Broadway. And even, I've known Broadway and stuff for 30 something years, and I'm still a little unsure on something like the difference between a conductor and a musical director, because I obviously they kind of linked, but how are they different?
Yeah, it's funny. In the Venn diagram, they share many responsibilities. A conductor can be a music director, but a music. Let me say that again. A music director can be a conductor, but there can also be a separate conductor and music director. There can also be a music supervisor. There's lots of different ways that the responsibilities get sort of divided up. But working in reverse, the conductor is the person who goes to the show 8 times a week and stands in front of the band and conducts the show, is actually the driver of the bus, so to speak. They're the person that, once the show is open, does the performances and is there 8 times a week conducting the show. The music direction part of the job is very front loaded in terms of the person that is in rehearsal, teaching the music to the singers, shaping the sound of the vocalists in rehearsal. And then when they get to, we get to the theater, they often end up being the same person, where they end up just continuing. Then they'll rehearse the band, and then we put everything together, and they'll conduct the band and the singers. Again, sometimes it happens where the music director isn't the conductor, but they tend to be. And then a music supervisor tends to be like a 30,000-foot, in charge of the music department in every aspect. While also being as involved in the nitty gritty as possible. But as the music supervisor, I don't conduct the show every night, right? So once the show opens, my job becomes, maintaining the show, going every week or so to check in and listen and give notes. Anytime we do recasting and auditions, I deal with that. I'll be at understudies' first performances. I'll be at, meetings, things like that. But the bulk of the work of the music supervisor is up to opening night, and then it changes after that.
So if you had to pick one of the three that you enjoy most, or are you someone who's, oh, thank God I get to do all three because I don't have to do just one all the time?
It's really tough. Before the pandemic, I conducted for 9 years straight. I mean, I did that job eight times a week, weekends, holidays, the whole thing. And I loved it. It's really fun. It's really fun to get to perform music and to be in front of the audience and to be with the cast. It's a very engaging job. And I love arranging and orchestrating so much. And sometimes you end up not being able to do both of those jobs from a creative standpoint. Like when you're the music director, you have to be at the piano every moment of rehearsal, paying attention, dealing with the director, dealing with the actors, actually being actively engaged in music directing the show. And so when there's arranging that has to happen and orchestrating that has to happen, that time, it's better to have that be two different people, because then that person doesn't have to sort of be at the piano all the time. So I love the writing and I love the creative part of it. So in post-pandemic times, in shows like Beautiful Noise and Hard Rock and Roll, Swept Away, and now Chess, I've really gravitated more towards the writing creative part of it and the music supervising. Just because
Well,
I
I'm
find that
glad.
fun.
I'm glad that you mentioned Swept Away. That was the Avett Brothers musical that was on a couple
Yeah.
of seasons ago. And one thing I'm kind of curious about is this idea of taking songs that were meant to be pop, folkish pop songs, etc., and making them sound Broadway, but not cheesy, but still pop, but still Broadway. How do you do that as an orchestrator?
Yeah. It's I actually go all the way back to the lyrics. At the end of the day, it is storytelling and the words have to make sense. And I have to, as an arranger and orchestrator, understand what the words are trying to say. Because one thing that theater music does really well is the music and the lyrics either are working together or against each other on purpose, right? But they tend to be working together. Sometimes you can have that tension. That there are amazing songs like "If I Loved You" from Carousel, which what they're saying is, if I loved you, I'd be miserable, and this would be the worst thing in the world. But the music is telling us obviously that they're going to fall in love, right? That's really fun and really interesting. And so I go back to the lyrics with all of those shows and just try to understand what the story is that's being told. And from there, I sort of move into what is the basic bones of the music sound like? What's the chord structure? Is it major? Is it minor? Do the chords change quickly? Are they slow? Are the harmonies dense or are they open? And try to sort of figure out what that's also trying to say and how it's working with the lyrics. And that part is how we spend most of our time developing shows, in that world of like, maybe it's just a piano and voice or just a guitar and voice. And you're really just making sure that the structure makes sense, and that in a very bare bones way, it is telling the story and it is feeling like it's furthering the plot. And then when it's time to orchestrate, I have all of those conversations again, and I go back to again the lyrics and say, well, is this character, does this moment feel like they should be guitar behind them? Should they have strings behind them? Should it be very percussive? Should it feel like it's suspended? Those are kind of all the questions that I ask. And with pre-existing music like Swept Away and, Heart of Rock and Roll, those songs exist and people know them and they understand them. So I have to understand what that is. I have to understand what the DNA of the song is. I'm not trying to like fully rip it apart and put it back together. Although I have done that before with shows, and sometimes you have to do that. You just can't do that with an entire show. And you sort of hope that you end up in a place where you're like, this really feels like it honors what the original piece of music was, but we put so much work and thought into the storytelling of it that it actually feels like it's musical theater.
Well, let me also ask, is there a moment in chess for you, besides the overture that you're obviously very proud of, that it really all came together for you, that from your perspective of the show, of like, this is why I do what I do.
Let's see. I think there the one place that I think that really comes to mind is in the first press conference sequence. It's like maybe 15 minutes into the show, we've not heard Leah Michelle sing yet. We have not heard Florence's character sing yet. She's on stage. We've heard Freddie sing. We've heard, we're kind of like easing our way into it. And Freddie is arguing with the reporters and going back and forth. And the tension is rising, and then Florence steps forward and like belts this, "Smile, you've got your first exclusive story." She's just like, it's so intense. She's so angry at them and so done with them. And I really wanted to make that feel like a pressure cooker that then explodes. And that section of the whole song does sound different than other versions of Chess for that reason, because I really wanted to like highlight Leah's first time singing, but also support it with everything that leads up to it as well, of this like, feeling like the top is about to blow, and then when it does, it really takes off. And so that orchestration there is it feels propulsive and aggressive and gives her this big bed to sit on to sing that.
Well, wow, this has been a percussive and explosive interview here with Brian Usifer. You can see his work for yourself in Chess. You have 2 more weeks to see it at the Imperial Theater on Broadway. Plus, if you want to hear kind of a different aspect of him and his music, he does have an extended play, an EP out that was done during COVID with Colin Donnell. He's doing the vocals there. It's called the 1920, which you can get yourself. So the last question that I do have for you, Brian, and again, thank you so much for such wonderful commentary here, is you mentioned Carousel, but was there a Broadway, maybe with this one, but was there a Broadway cast album growing up that knocked your socks off, especially in particular in terms of the way it sounded, the way the instruments came together, as with the lyrics and the story?
Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't grow up doing theater at all. I grew up playing, I had classical piano lessons, and then I played in rock bands and jazz bands, and I grew up listening to the radio and Billy Joel and the Beatles and 90s hip hop and crazy stuff like that. And so, I didn't really start to get into theater until I was maybe midway through my undergrad, in my early 20s. And a friend of mine gave me a recording of the last 5 years, the original off-Broadway recording of the last 5 years. And I was so obsessed with the sound of that because it sounded, the composition is incredible, the orchestrations are incredible, but it sounded like music in a way that I hadn't connected theater to yet. The things that I had encountered in theater, like I had done like Grease and Bye Bye Birdie and, shows that like, I was like, okay, I get this, but this is not like what I want to do. And then I heard that and I was like, oh my God, these songs are incredible. Like I could really see myself doing music like that in theater. And so that was like a gateway for me in a big way. And then I remember hearing the original cast recording of Sweeney Todd, and that was like, well, okay, if theater is everything from this to that, that is what I want to do with my life, because I don't think I could ever choose between those two things. And I love all kinds of music so much, and it really made me understand that theater has this huge, wide range of musical styles, and that's where I was like, okay, I'm in. That's what I want to do.
Well, all we can do is wish Brian Usifer the chance to do all those different styles in a very, very long career. Congratulations again on your Tony nomination for Chess, and have a great Tony season. And next, and everybody, is Galileo coming in next season on
That's
Broadway.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, you're the orchestrator for Galileo. There's a brand new musical with Raul Esparza and remind me.
Dwight Woods.
Great. So
yeah,
congratulations on Chess, and fingers crossed and hopes high for Galileo. Thank you, Brian Usifer.
Thanks so much, Dave.